Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we have our world famous speakers and very popular topic longevity. We have Professor Edward, Professor David Smith, Professor David Schumacher, Professor in practice, Mr. Marshall, as well as Professor Donalds. So let's start our discussions. First, I want to give chance Professor Edward.
Ah, Thank you very much. This is one of the most important topics because let me be blunt. If you're dead, we can't talk about any of these things, okay? Longevity is about staying alive and staying healthy, not being 90 years old and in a bed and you can't do anything. That's what longevity is about. But um, throughout human history, and certainly in recent history, there's a phrase we have in the United States: the only things certain are death and taxes. Well, I've been trying to get rid of the latter, but it looks like we can probably make a dent in the former as well. We've seen a couple of very interesting things happening in the last 2 or 3 decades. First of all, we've seen a breakthrough in the thinking about aging. Um, Most people are familiar with Ray Kurzweil, The Singularity is Near. He's done a number of classic books about what is possible in the future, including how long we live, how we connect with artificial intelligence and interact with it, and so forth. But most interesting in the last couple of decades has been the research of people like Aubrey de Grey, who wrote the classic book Ending Aging. That's from Aubrey de Grey. A recent one is called Lifespan by David Sinclair. And what these books do and what these researchers have done is they've looked into aging and our understanding why we age. It's not just something that is going to happen no matter what. There's a biological basis, obviously, to aging. And because we're understanding it more, we now have the capacity or the possibility of doing something about it, of slowing aging, perhaps ending aging. And of course, most important is dealing with the ailments of aging. As most of you all know, it's in your latter years that most of your health problems occur. Cancer, heart problems, and so forth. Young people are less susceptible to most of those. Most of the medical bills, as well as the ailments in this country and in most other countries, come when you're old because the body is starting to break down. In a sense, the good news is that is globally and certainly in the developed world, people are living longer, much longer, because of advances in medicine. The bad news is, in a sense, that, for example, Alzheimer's is going up and up and up in most of these countries because Alzheimer's is a disease associated, obviously, with aging. But because we're understanding, again, what Aubrey looked at is he looked at sort of the biological genetic basis for aging and what we call senescence. There's called epigenetic approach as well. I'm sure we'll get some discussion about that. But the point is, because we're now understanding the process of aging, we now can use technology to fight it, to have longer, healthier lives. I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. We know in, I think it was 2018, the enzyme telomerase was sequenced. And what telomerase does is it keeps the telomeres on the ends of your chromosomes from shrinking. And what that means in English or any other language is every time your cell reproduces, the little telomeres at the end of the chromosomes get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And over time, they disappear. And so the cells do not reproduce properly. And we kind of, that's part of the process of aging. The enzyme telomerase can now be operationalized to slow that process, to keep the telomeres growing. Another example is the CRISPR-Cas9 genetic editing tool, which has been used just recently in experiments to turn off the production of tau proteins in neurons in the brain. What does that mean, again, in layman's terms? Well, it's the clumping together of tau proteins in neurons in the brain that's associated with Alzheimer's. So we're now looking at ways that we could literally turn off Alzheimer's. That's what is happening on the technological front. So what I'm seeing now is if we have the opportunities and if we have the talent, we now can take the insights into aging and we can take the technology and we can create a system that will allow us to live a lot longer and a lot healthier. And what I advocate, by the way, is that we need a system that reforms, for example, our Food and Drug Administration certification system, and in other countries as well. I've looked at the drug certification system in a number of countries, and part of the problem is it's rather antiquated given the technology that we have today, and allowing for what I like to call, imagine a Steve Jobs of healthcare. Imagine a Steve Jobs figuring out, in communications, 0 people had smartphones 15 years ago. Now 87% of adults in America have smartphones. Imagine entrepreneurs pulling together these technologies and pulling together this research and creating opportunities for people to live longer, healthier lives. So this is one of the most exciting topics ever in human history. So thank you, Sharif, for this opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Edward. Professor David Schumacher.
Yes, hello. Longevity. This is something that I can talk long about. Okay, that was my attempt at a starting out joke. We'll not try any more of that. No, seriously. Longevity is something that I think probably all of us can talk a great deal about, and I have before. Previously, when I've talked here about longevity, and every time that we talk on the topic, I point out that the Transhumanist Party, which I'm a member of, an officer of, our number one core value is all about longevity, increasing health span and lifespan. So that's very important to that particular cause. And there are a couple of different platform planks that talk specifically about this. And they usually talk about engaging research to do some of the type of things that Edward just spoke about. So last time that I was here, I talked about 3 different types of aging. The conventional aging, pretty much what we see when we look around the type of medical care that people get today, research and treatments that are out there now for healthy extension. And then something called radical life extension, which is looking to break the 120-year barrier to be able to carry on for much longer periods of time. But today, I want to kind of go in a little bit different direction. I want to think about aging today as in America, in Japan, in most of the civilized world, if we can use that expression, people are living much, much longer than they used to. Before this time, say if people lived to be age 40, 50, something in that nature, there wasn't this long period of decline that Edward talked about. People functioned very well and then reached a point of decline and then very soon after were gone, or something took them tragically, suddenly beyond that. So while aging has improved as far as pushing the upper limit age out, we've ended up with this much, much longer period of decline. And that's one of the things that we really are working on, need to work on, and I think longevity needs to be focused on as well. So there are breakthroughs coming. I feel it. Edward showed us some very good books with some high quality, high caliber people and others like David Church, the Church Laboratory. But what do we do today? I'm kind of a practical person. My title at the Transhumanist Party is Director of Applied Innovation. So I look for innovations that we can apply now to improve life. So one of the things that we can do is produce products, good for entrepreneurs again, produce products that mitigate the effects of aging as we move forward, as we wait for these great breakthroughs. I worked around jet aircraft for about 20 years, and I have parts of my hearing profile that are just non-existent because of the whine, the sounds, the loud noises of those aircraft. So I've had to wear hearing aids for many years. And I'll tell you what, the first ones I got were more trouble than they were worth. Even ones that I got maybe as soon as 5 years ago still had to go over the ear. They were better quality. I could hear in environments that were noisy as well as environments that were quiet. But if you'd put on glasses, these days, if you have to put on a face mask for some issue, they were always in the way. And from an aesthetic standpoint, you looked old when you wore them, even if you weren't old, because people associated that loss. Thank you, Edward. People associated that loss of hearing with age. Well, what if you could wear a hearing aid that people couldn't see, that produced the sounds that allowed you to hear the sounds that were missing from your hearing profile? That would be a tremendous change. And I went to something like that not too long ago. This is small enough, if I can get in front of the camera, this is small enough that it fits entirely inside my ear. Doesn't affect sunglasses, doesn't affect the mask. And it allows me to hear as good as I did before I needed hearing aids. So that's an idea of compensation. Now, I, being interested in technology and working in technology for so long, I'm never satisfied with just getting back to where I started. It would seem like when I would rebuild a motorcycle that I was working on, if it had a problem, I would rebuild it and I'd make it larger, faster. I'd do something with it to actually improve it if I was going to spend the money. Well, that can be true of the things that we need to do to help mitigate aging while we wait for these great breakthroughs. Like, for example, these, and this is not a commercial for this product, but it is a product that I use, actually give me hearing capability that I didn't have when I was 25. Okay, I can go into a restaurant and hear, I can go into a library and hear two different sound profiles, but sometimes I need to hear something that's right in front of me, but not what's behind me. Or I need to be able to hear more high-pitched voices. I might be in an environment like that. So devices like this have 4 profiles inside. And there's no buttons, nothing to wear out. By air pressure, you give your ear a slight tap and it runs through the different profiles. So I can walk into a place and if the profile isn't right, I can change it. That's something I couldn't do with my natural ears. That's the kind of upgrades that I think that we'll see and fit perfectly into my idea of transhumanism. Perhaps one day we'll be able to do that with this built in and not even have to have something that slides invisibly into the ear canal. Okay, other things that will help, and we're starting to see that, is real-time monitoring as you age, to be able to wear devices that report back on a periodic basis. Perhaps we'll move to real time on these ideas so that medical staff can have screening artificial intelligence that looks at the data that comes in from all their patients and flags particular conditions or things that a physician or specialist in a particular area needs to look at. Instead of you making an appointment with your doctor because, gee, I just don't feel right today, or I had a pain or something like that, your monitoring device, your cell phone, or a conventional phone call signals you that the doctor would like to see you on Tuesday at 9 a.m. to discuss something that we've seen in your data. Those kind of improvements are the things that we need to work on going forward, and I do see that. But it's not all just about health. We need to be able to manage our finances better as we age, and there's fintech technology that's coming along to help us do that. We need to be able to keep our minds sharp. There's cognitive technology that's coming along to give us exercises that we can do and evaluate where we're at, cognitively speaking. We can use virtual reality. We've talked about the metaverse on this show, and virtual reality and augmented reality. And we can use that as part of therapies. and to help us with our aging. Transportation technologies is another area for needing to get around. I remember when my mother got to the age where she couldn't drive a car, and it became very difficult to get the doctor's appointments and just to go shopping and to do different things. So technologies that are already here, like Uber and Lyft and other ride sharing, is a help. I think autonomous vehicles combined with the ride sharing concept is something that we're going to see. So it takes the stigma away, once again, of having to wait for the old people bus to show up outside your house to take you shopping. These things are all important. And I think this is very much a topic of longevity. And those are my opening remarks this day.
Thank you. Thank you. It's excellent analysis. Professor David Smith.
Sharif, thank you so much. I do have to, though, start with a correction for Edward. Edward, we're not getting old, we're getting older.
Okay.
Very important distinction there.
Look,
I think you're only as old as you feel. And
I got two 11-year-old daughters, so I'm young.
And I too really relate with David, but in a very different way. In my misguided youth, I was a roadie for some of the major bands and was on tour. And yes, we ran the sound pretty loud, but I haven't gone quite to that point yet. But this is a great topic, as was said. You know some of my background on it. I kind of like to look at the market size as part of it. In a recent study that actually just came out on January 27th, forecasts that the market size for longevity is going to reach 182.9 billion by 2028, which is a pretty interesting market size going forward. Because I remember when I went to my first longevity conference with actually Edward Aldridge, a great down in San Diego, the market size was not even a tenth of that. So the market has been growing considerably as you look there. And if you look at some of the scientific research today and what's being published in some of the journals, and Sharif, your ability to pick these topics is amazing. I got one of my emails from the National Institute of Health here in the United States this morning, where I've been on their Innovation Advisory Board. And the topic today was life expectancies. And so your timing is always great. But today, if you look at life expectancies with and how longevity is changing into it, the consensus is if we use every bit of the science we had today, and again, you have to discount trauma and its impact. Or episodic, is it? But if you begin to look at why humans age, how they age, and what are the inventions that can slow the aging process, is if I were in my teens today, they are saying that my life expectancy should live into our 140s. And, so some ways I'd like to go back to those teenage years and my misguided youth. But we're beginning to see a paradigm shift from disease-focused treatments to those that address underlying mechanisms of this, and how that can and how it can shift and do things with that. And that to me is a fundamental shift on what we're seeing, what we can do, and how longevity is going to hit us. If you look at the last 100 years, it truly has been a renaissance in life expectancy, and the curve has been very steep. I go back though, and I look at early literature. Let's go back to the dawn of civilization, and humankind has always been enamored with the concept of eternal life. And you saw the Iliad and others like that, going out trying to discover the fountain of youth and all of those. And so we've seen that, and we're fueling this possibility go forward. But we've achieved tremendous groundbreaking milestones in diagnosis and treatment of disease, particularly the diseases which are considered diseases which affect broad swaths of the population. Uh, but it has been kind of uneven. The last 20 years, we've actually seen the life expectancy curve tapering off some, but we believe it's going to probably start back up a little bit more, and as we go, particularly when regenerative healthcare comes into place, where I have the possibility to grow new organs and to grow things like that to face it. And you go from the concept of a digital twin to maybe a biological twin in ways to actually help your longevity increase. Now, I take a little exception with different. I believe we have two different age groups, and we see them in different ways to put them. And one of them is a lifespan age group, which is the age where we actually die. But then you have a health span age group. And this is really the times until you're disabled and how that comes back and affects you. And those are two different criteria that you kind of see. One of our challenges today is that our disability age group is not advancing as fast as our life age group is. So we're still working on those long-term diseases and artifacts that affect us as we get older, and how that falls into place. There's just so much we can talk about this. I also later in the program want to talk a little bit about what the ecosystem is and how it has dramatically changed over the last several years, and look at the areas. But I agree with a lot of what David said too, is that the auxiliary markets around longevity have been just tremendously increasing. You've seen the rise of robotics to help assist people as they get older, the autonomous vehicles and others. And if I go and look at the total ecosystem, its growth has been tremendous in just the last decade. So Sharif, I think that's enough to get started. And like I said, Edward, it's not old, it's older.
Thank you, Professor David Smith, for your great view about longevity. Now I request Mr. Marshall.
Well, thank you, Sharif, and thank you for having me on this esteemed panel of longevity people here. As we know, and I think as David Smith just pointed out, the term longevity and the concept of longevity has grabbed the imagination both in travel, science fiction, and utopian novels for quite some time. To add a little levity to this, just to send a message to everybody out there, longevity is doable. I'm an example of it. I was born in 1851. That's the year before Wells Fargo adopted their first innovation, which was the stagecoach. So that's my levity here. But basically and fundamentally, the term longevity is a great term. It has a lot of meanings for different people. For statisticians, it has to do with lifespan and understanding how likely people will live, and that affects insurance products such as life insurance and things of that nature. My contribution to this is really not in that area. I think that longevity is also impacted by the climate. And as everyone here knows, I'm greatly involved in the climate crisis and addressing climate restoration and climate repair. And that is a critical component for the livelihoods and for the lifestyle
lifestyles and the quality of life, not just the longevity of people, but the quality of life that people enjoy. And it's around the world. One thing we do know is that the climate crisis affects people differently in different parts of the world, and it affects their longevity, how long they are expected to live in a certain area. Obviously, the more people are breathing in greenhouse gas emissions, the more it affects their metabolism and their lifestyles, and it causes things. Children are experiencing, by the way, asthma at a higher rate than ever before. Right now, everyone on this panel is breathing at least 400 parts per million NOx. And that is not where we need to be. We need to be much lower than that. So this is the element where longevity, in my mind, plays a great role as a goal to increase longevity by addressing the climate crisis and reducing the issues of climate and inducing climate repair. And I'll leave that as my intro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. One interesting quirk I've noticed within futurist discourse, futurism, transhumanist thought, and so on, is that it feels to me that there is a disproportionate emphasis being placed on technological development and innovation, whilst ethics and morality are left in the trail of dust as exponential growth races on ahead almost indiscriminately. I think think tanks and research teams, legislators need to figure out how to match advancements and innovation within ethics and morality with technological and emerging advancements. Because at the moment, in my opinion, one is being focused and concentrated on at the expense of the other. Neither, where advances are suppressed, hidden away because anxieties raised.
You're breaking up.
Mr. Adam, I cannot hear you. Okay, no problem.
You
You
lost
take
your
your
sound.
time.
Oh,
Yes.
have I? Okay.
Now it's
Try-
okay.
Oh, now it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Where was I? Oh yeah, but of course we don't want an imbalance going into the other direction either, where technological advancements are suppressed and hidden away because of fears and anxieties raised when ethics and morality are adhered to too rigidly and unwaveringly. I like to call it just-in-caseism, like whataboutism, because of course one of humanity's greatest assets and defining features and characteristics is our sense of adventure, intrepid exploration into space, into the mind, into philosophical thought and medicine as well. A stagnating civilization is a tragedy, especially when framed teleologically. So regarding ethics and morality, we want to prevent the abuse and misuse of technology and the abuse and misuse of people using great technology. So when you raise the issue of technological abuse, one usually thinks about nuclear weapons, power stations, excessive surveillance, but cutting-edge solutions to the problems of aging and the inevitability of death could also be abused. I remember articles about future penal systems where using psychopharmacology, neurostimulation, future drugs, whatever, where a criminal could be sentenced to experience centuries or even millennia trapped in a prison to serve such sentences, whereas in the real outside waking world only a matter of hours or minutes pass by. It's extremely chilling, and it's a trope found within fantasy fiction and science fiction: forced immortality, life extension against one's will, indefinite lifespans without the person's consent, so on, as a punishment to send a message to other people who will be criminals in the future, or for sadistic pleasure. For example, it's featured in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison, The Jaunt by Stephen King, and thought experiments like Rocco's Basilisk, which originated from Less Wrong. So, in my opinion, it's important that we need to safeguard humanity against what we could call weaponized longevity. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about the sound.
Thank you. Professor Donald.
Well, I think that every culture in the world has basically methods that they believe will extend life. I know that in Chinese medicine, there's quite a few things. Astragalus, for an instance, is something that they've taken forever. And it turns out that astragalus in very concentrated doses actually does cause the telomeres to stop falling apart and start even regrowing to some extent. Before I talk about what I'm going to talk about is something a little bit different, which is what you can do yourself personally, some of the things that we know right now. But before I talk about it, I'd like to say how we know what we know, because it's very, our human brains have a tendency to, when we hear something from somebody, our brain prioritizes it and thinks it's true, especially if they're a kind of person who, like, there's some people that people basically think what they say is true just because of their presentation, their voice quality, their confidence, and things like that. And the experience of one person is basically useless. I mean, there's some use to it, but if somebody comes up and tells you something, you've got to kind of fight that in your brain. You've got to say, like, what is it that I can do to actually say what I'm doing is true? And there's some ways of doing it, but I'm going to focus on two, which is the gold standard, which is double-blind studies. And then I'm going to mention clinical evidence as well, which are both somewhat useful. And what a double-blind study is they give somebody something, like give a drug, they give them some treatment or something like that, and you just divide it into two groups, and one of the groups gets the treatment or the drug or whatever, and the other one doesn't. But you do it in such a way that neither group knows whether they got it or not. That's what they do to test drugs now, everything. And the double blind is that not only don't the people know, but the people who are giving it to them also don't know, because that removes psychological factors of the person kind of like acting a certain way towards the people who get it and a different way to the people who don't get it, and causing placebo effects and enhancing placebo effects and things like that. Okay, so that's a gold standard. Some of the things I'm going to talk about have gold standard tests with very small groups of people, like 50 or something like that. And then, statistically, in order to say something is true, you need to have enough people being tested, because like, just to put it in perspective, if you want to make a generalization about people and you have everybody on Earth and you only sample everybody but one person, you're going to be pretty darn sure that it applies to everybody. What happens if you do it for half the people? Well, what's the probability that it's going to work for the other half? And you can get that to smaller and smaller groups until you can finally you can predict from one smaller group, that in the United States it'd be about 2,000 people, you can predict what the larger group is going to be. And so if it's a small sample, even if it's a gold standard test, it may not be enough to generalize into the population. But I'm going to talk about some gold standard things that have happened that are smaller. And so what I take those as is an indicator. So I ask myself the question, is what they've learned in this particular test dangerous? I mean, if I started taking some new supplement and that particular supplement, I may be wasting my money. I may be taking a very expensive supplement for no reason. But on the other hand, if it's not going to hurt me, I might start taking it. Okay, so aging, there's different parts to what causes aging, and one of them is the easiest to address is free radicals, and what those are basically parts of molecules that go around and they hook to your cells, and when they hook to your DNA or your cell, it messes it up so it's not as effective as it was. Not just the DNA, the mitochondria, and various parts of your body. Sometimes cells just stop reproducing, and that's sentient. That's sentient cells. Sentient, yeah. I never say it out loud. I just read it. Sentient cells, and those collect in your body, and they're a source of inflammation. So people with arthritis wind up having a lot of sentient cells at the site. And then there's lipids that basically cross-link. Sugar will get in your cells, and it'll link and basically cause it to stop working. And that's what one of the reasons that sugar makes your brain, rots your brain and rots your skin and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, what can you do about it? One is lifestyle, and another is basically taking drugs or supplements that might change or stop some of those processes. And I'm going to mention one other thing very quickly, which is coming up. Let me double check its name here. It's sorry about this. I queued it up, but I'm not sure where. It is, while I look for it, I'm going to say that it's a new method where they can actually reset your cells. And there's a new startup in Silicon Valley. I've got Tesla here. Okay, oh, I know where it is. Anyway, I don't want to waste everybody's time looking for it. I'll find it and tell you later. But it's a Japanese, it's a technique. The guy's got a Japanese name and I can't remember what it is, but it actually resets your cells. It sets them back to become stem cells. And there's a little bit of a problem with it, because when we're before we're even in embryo, we start out as stem cells, and our body then basically tells the process of becoming a person is telling these stem cells what part of you that they're supposed to be. So this particular technique is actually turned rats back into back to blobs of jello, because they were undifferentiated. It actually reversed all of the epigenetic factors that created the mouse. But now they've been able to stop it. So they can actually take your liver, for an instance, and target it and basically rewind the clock for it. And I mean, that's pretty amazing. So anyway, I want to say right off that I'm going to go into some of the things I do for myself. And again, as I'm saying, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just telling you some of the papers that I read. And I also want to say a really good place to find these papers is the site Life Extension. Look it up. It actually sells vitamins and supplements of various kinds of things, and it takes the money that it makes and it invests in anti-aging research. It's a nonprofit, and anyway, so I'd really recommend it. So I take metformin, and metformin is it's used for type 2 diabetes, but it causes your telomeres to fall apart less quickly. It does an amazing amount of anti-aging things. To do the kind of study that I was talking about, a double-blind study with a large amount of people, is very expensive. Metformin is a generic drug that no one's going to make any more money on, no matter what they do. And so it's actually being studied at Stanford as an anti-aging thing. One I've discovered lately, which I'm really excited about, is called Fisetin, Fisetin. And you can search for any of these things that I'm saying. And what it's a senolytic. It actually clears the body of this sentient cells so that it studies, again, double blind but small, have showed that it reduces arthritis, pain. It just does an amazing amount of stuff for you. Your eyes, like even my eye doctor told me to help preserve my eyes, I should take basically, you can buy them in formulas, but it's xanthian, lutein, vitamin C, vitamin E, and carotenoids. And that actually has stabilized my potential macular degeneration. If you do that, your eyes, you're less likely to get macular degeneration. And even my doctor told me that. Vitamin C is one of the most amazing. It's dirt cheap, and it's a great anti-aging thing. It's just protects you from a lot of stuff. And but the main key is diet. One of the main keys is diet and exercise. So your mom told you to eat your vegetables, and all these good things that I'm talking about basically come from vegetables. I mean, reduce the amount of meat you eat, because there's different genes that express themselves, and the ones that express themselves when you eat meat are less good for you. And exercise. Exercise is the golden magic key to having a not necessarily longer lifespan, but definitely a longer health span. It causes a lot of genes to express themselves that are helpful for your thinking, for your circulation, for all kinds of stuff. So I would definitely add aerobic exercise to your life if you're not doing it. I walk at least 5 miles a day, and it makes me feel a lot better when I do. So I sleep better. Get a good night's sleep. That's incredibly healthy for you. And I'll add some other things when I come back. So I'm going to go now and pass it on to the next person.
Thank you. This is really very interesting discussions, and I believe our audience also like today's session. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I request Professor Edward.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I'm going to get off in a few minutes. Yeah, this has been a great discussion, and I hope that your listeners, who are going to be the talent of the future, appreciate the opportunities in this area. I'm working on a piece right now where I talk about how to move from a sick care system to a real healthcare system, and it relies on technology. The fact that we have sequenced the human genome, and the cost has gone down from $100 million in 2001 to under $1,000 today. That we are better at understanding the process of aging. We're better able to understand what our human genome means when we look at it, what we're susceptible to. Number 3, wearable diagnostics. David has talked about that wearable diagnostics, where I can have these things, either wear them or implanting them. Number 4, real world monitoring, so that if in fact it looks like I'm going to have a heart attack, the artificial intelligence monitoring me will know it before I know it, and the medics will be to our door. But number 5, we may be able to head that off to begin with, with something like CRISPR-Cas9 or some of the other new techniques that are being developed. So for those of you listening in the Asia Pacific area, this is literally the wave of the future. This is the industry of the future. Try to be try to train yourself in this area. Try to be the Steve Jobs, if you would, of healthcare, because there's going to be an incredible market for this. Because what better thing to do than to keep us from aging poorly, to keep our lives extended, to keep us healthy. So this is very exciting. And Sharif, thanks as always for a great show.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Edward. Professor David Schumacher.
Well, I couldn't agree more. This has been a great show, and I've enjoyed the comments from everyone. It's tough for me to consolidate my concluding remarks because there's so much I want to comment on that everyone said, but I'm going to end with maybe these two main points. The first point is I agree with David about old and older. I think that our thoughts that we have in our head really do affect what goes on in our bodies. We see that so with the placebo effect, as was talked about, and there's been other studies. So it's important what you think. That goes to the topic back to the hearing aids that I was showing you, to where I can have something invisible in my ears that gives me my capability back, and as a matter of fact, even improves on that, and I don't have the stigma that I self-imposed on myself previously with older hearing aid type of devices. So I feel better about myself, and it's more than just self-esteem. It's actually a physical effect in the body when you feel better about yourself and you focus better in society. These things are important because, at least where I live in the world, there is still stereotyping by people's age. I know that when I have conversations with people sometimes, and when it comes around to age, if I tell them my age, many times I feel like I'm being treated differently after that because I may be older than what some of those people have thought that I was. I'm not pointing fingers at individual people. It's the society we live in that says at this age you do this, and in the next decade you do this, and it follows on. So those things are very important. If you have an opportunity to advocate against what many people call ageism, it's a good idea to have conversations and to try to draw people into that, because I think people do it without thinking. So the idea is to have shows like this and to talk and to get people thinking along that. So one of the things that I like to tell people, especially really young people, is if they say, but yeah, you are actually aging. And I go, yes, that's true. And by the way, do you know when the signs of aging actually first start becoming noticeable in the human body? For most people, it's around age 25. And when they get into their 30s and when they get into their 40s. So aging isn't just something for people in their most senior years. It's something that starts. As a matter of fact, we spoke about telomeres earlier. And when you're conceived in the womb, that's when your telomeres are the longest. They start shortening drastically even before you're born, and then continue to shorten throughout life. So from that standpoint, you're aging even before you're born. So just something to think about. Now, that's what you can do in general society. Quickly, the other thing that I think that's really important is that you take ownership of your own aging. Whatever age you are, take ownership of that and have a plan. I have a plan, and if I had more time, I'd put it up on the screen and go through it and show you the different things that I'm doing. And perhaps next time when we talk about longevity, I'll be able to do that. But you own it. It's not your doctor. It's not your partner. It's not where you work. You own your own aging plan. Use what's out there. That you might be limited by what's out there or what's affordable or what you can get to, but you can still have a plan and you can still improve from whatever the baseline is. So those are the two items that I'll close with today. And once again, I echo another great show, another great topic.
Thank you, Professor David Schumacher. Now I request Professor David Smith.
I have to echo what he said as well. It's a great show on this today, and it's one which I think is very, very important, and one that we can use going forward because of all the changes and what we have. Sharif, the graphic you just brought is one where I promised us earlier a quick view at the ecosystem. where you begin to see all the elements going there, where nanotechnology really has helped us as we begin to get and increase our ability to deal with longevity, particularly how we're looking at targeted repair and now surgery as part of that. You know, AI is helping us tremendously on this, and not only in the doctor's offices in the hospital, but at home too, with all the monitoring devices and things we've talked about with the wearables and the robots. But another place that we often forget is there's really looking at ways to look at how to change how insurance attracts us, how to do medication management. Um, One of the statistics that totally blows me away is that almost 70% of prescriptions are never filled when you go through a doctor and what you see there. You know, you see the biological causes of aging, and we're doing a lot of science around them. And the therapeutics to slow or reverse aging are going dramatically. Many of the people have talked about some of the other drugs, some of the targeted physical therapies and things that can work there. I'm very excited about the next one, the cell and gene therapy. I'm already seeing this go. I have seen some CRISPR edits done on some of my friends to reverse some genetic defects they had, and it's working. And we're seeing, you know, the smart homes, the mobility tools, the robotics to help us begin there. But, you know, we're also seeing, again, like I said earlier, regenerative healthcare, age reversal with tissue regeneration, organ regeneration, 3D printing of organs, uh, more and more use of growth hormones and the other things that can help us there. But to really look at this, it's changing many of the ecosystem companies and things, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now. And so the regulatory impact is high, the science impact, the possibility for entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship in this way is going to be very dynamic because, as was said earlier in the presentation, we're all going to die at some point. And so it's really in our own best interest to begin to look at how can we address longevity? How can we address how we do any aging? Uh, the emphasis really is in everyone's best interest. Now, the impacts that the regulatory environment has to solve is big. If, as some of the scientists say, we have the capability today for people in their teens to live to 140, how does that impact the future of work? How many career changes are we going to have? Today, if you look at the average person, maybe even on this panel, we have gone through, on average, 9 different career changes during our lifetime. If I now take that to 140 and we change and I hate the term retirement age, how many will we go to? How much retraining do we have to do? You know, you've heard me say, Sharif, on the show many times, that education is a lifelong product now. It's not something we do at one time. But if we're not constantly learning, we're sliding behind. I even tell my developers that I expect them to learn while they're working, and that what they learned in college is out of date by the time they graduate, particularly in high technology. And that's a true fact as we go forward. But the impact on these changes hits the government square on too. How do we provide support? What is our new definition of retirement? I mean, I'm at the place where I'm at, I hate the term retirement age, but I'm not going to retire anytime soon. And you see those things because, and with many of my friends, we all are contributing significantly to the quality of life for others on this planet. And we all have the capability to solve problems and make an impact. And to me, that's what longevity is, and how the longevity definitions change, is that we have the ability to work collaboratively to make an impact. And, you know, David used earlier, I think, or Marshall, the wisdom of ages. I think there's a wisdom of ages, and there's the optimistic viewpoint of youth, in that they have to work together to create something that can solve the major problems, the grand challenges we face on this globe today. And this longevity ecosystem and what we plan to do with it is some of our greatest hope for being able to solve these massive challenges we have today and bring the future parts of technology to bear. Closing remark on that is that Adam talked about some of the impacts of the technology that's going forward. When I teach on how do you manage technology, plan and forecast technology and things, I often use this comment. If you look up the definition of technology, technology is not a thing. But most of us think of technology as being a thing. The definition of technology that I like is it's the application of knowledge to achieve a result. And that's the technology that we want to use as we look at longevity, is we want to look at the technologies, the capabilities, the competencies, the services, the science, the entrepreneurship that has the capability to have an impact on us. And that is so much of what we're trying to do today. So Sharif, thank you so very much. One of my favorite topics, because I want to be the beneficiary of this topic. So thank you again.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Marshall.
Well, thank you, Sharif. And being with this esteemed young group of people here, I'm very happy to be among their membership, even though I'm 140. But speaking seriously on this topic, as I said before, my focus is an addendum to everyone else. I think both David's and everyone else on this panel has addressed some really important topics about longevity and aging. I just want to give some statistics. I know that David Smith likes to give statistics on market size. I'm going to give statistics on the populations of the world to the best that I could find. And I discovered that, of course, our focus here, typically in the meetings that I attend or help manage in this group, it has to do mostly with the developing world. And I think it's important to look at the difference between the developing world and the developed world. So in developed countries, as of the 2010 estimate, in the developed countries, the typical age span of long-term age span is 77 to 90 years. That's an important number. And to give the medium or mean number, Canada comes up at 81.29 years. Now, that's remarkable. Of course, it's half my age, but that's okay. But seriously, in the developing world, though, the age bracket of people typically living is 32 years to 80 years. Now, that's quite a distinction between the developing world and the developed world. And we need to work on that. And I believe, this is my contention, is that among all the other reasons why people are being affected by, their longevity is affected by healthcare, hygiene, diet, nutrition, exercise, as Donald pointed out, and lifestyle and crime rates. There's no doubt about that. But I think another component that's often left out is climate. And we know that water quality, soil quality, and air quality, which are the big three factors of the climate crisis, need to be addressed. And I look forward to, with everybody here, helping to address those issues on an ongoing basis. And by the way, we pointed out that in Canada, we said 81.29 years. In the developing countries, the mean is Mozambique with 41.37 years. Now, 41 years is in the developing world just you're in your mid stride. So I think we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have a lot to do to change that. And the other thing that David Smith pointed out that I'd like to, and so did Adam and Donald, is that the issue is not just the longevity or the life you're living, the lifetime you're living, but the quality of life that you lead. And that is also affected by the climate crisis. So again, I'm here to support everyone's efforts to improve longevity. I love the topic. We all need to be a beneficiary of longevity. And by the way, just so you folks know, the secret is Sharif is double my age. So anyway, so seriously, on a serious note, I want to thank everybody here and keep up the good work and live long and prosper, as
Thank
Spock
you.
would say.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Thank you. Now I request Mr. Adam for your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Sharif. It's also one of my favourite topics as well. I think one of the most widely known and publicly acknowledged visions within transhumanism is anti-aging, longevity, life extension. So I think the usual rebuttals and counter-arguments have become quite familiar now. One of the most puzzling questions asked to people who support life extension research and development, asked by people who are usually against it, is wouldn't you get bored, or wouldn't we humans in general grow bored? And I always thought, well, no. It seemed counterintuitive to even ask a question in my mind. Of course, now I'm a bit more open-minded, but because I thought intuitively that many people at least wouldn't, and that there will always be novelties to explore. There could be an abundance of unique, once-in-a-universe's lifetime events and phenomena, new combinations of already existing things into new things to create novel, emergent phenomena. And if humanity's genius is sustained long enough and continued long enough, we might be able to explore strange worlds where paradoxes are resolved or just don't exist, where we might be able to prove or disprove the existence of infinity itself. So earlier I highlighted the importance of consent, free will regarding longevity. We would become monsters truly if we allowed weaponized longevity to punish people by forcing them to live forever in, say, solitary confinement, heaven forbid. But we must also honour the importance of consent going the other way as well, where if a post-human has been living for millennia and does finally actually want to die, then that decision is sacred, and maybe dying is the only doorway to certain other worlds inaccessible to us, even after millions of years of advancements, or however many centuries a person exists for. We don't all want to live so long that the worlds only accessible through death are abandoned or forgotten about. But yeah, the questions like, wouldn't you start to feel bored, follow the pattern of questioning where the person asking the question really doesn't want the other person they're asking the question to achieve radical longevity, as if they want you to renounce it, as if they feel entitled to change your mind and have a say in how long everybody else should be living for, even though it's none of their business, of course. And to be honest, death is a fear of mine. I cannot bear the idea of falling into blackness of non-existence, even though I certainly acknowledge the existence of afterlives and I support the belief in them. The things I've said today seem to concern extreme far futurism rather than the more grounded earthly near futurism. I know some of the things I said today were a bit otherworldly, but I hope that the afterlife, if there is one, is simply the far, far future where post-humans or post-humans use quantum archaeology to revive everything that has ever lived and died, resurrected back to life again, which I think is one of the most radical ideas within post-humanism and singularitarianism, but that's one of the reasons I find it so compelling and so interesting. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Donald.
Well, I'm going to make my concluding remarks by kind of doing a line from the life extension now to life extension in the future. And I think that what Marshall said and others have said are incredibly important, because the life extension in the United States is actually going down. It's the only developed country in the history of the world since the Industrial Revolution where the lifespan is actually going down. Why is that? Well, it's nobody's 100% sure, but it apparently has to do with a fentanyl epidemic that we're having. There's a very powerful opiate that is very easy to overdose on, so a lot of people are dying. So that becomes something that everyone has mentioned, which is healthcare. That's our social commitment to healthcare. I mean, if you look at statistics, look at kind of the history, and people will tell you Finns have a really high suicide rate, and Finns drink a whole lot. And I looked it up, and Ireland and England and lots of countries drink more than Finland does. Their suicide, I think the United States suicide rate now is higher than Finland. And why is that? It's because when they recognized the problem, they got together, they got their medical people together, they informed the public, they made naltrexone, for instance, will stop people from dying from opiate overdoses. They started making things available to actually address the problems. It's not something that we do in the United States. I want to mention, I mentioned diet and exercise, but I want to mention one other thing, which is kind of going off something David Smith often says, is that using your brain to do things complicated cognitively reduces your chance of getting Alzheimer's disease by a lot. And they've done quite a few studies, and again, they're the type of study which are clinical or epidemiological, and where they basically looked at people who exercise their cognitive facilities a great deal, and they've looked at people who don't, and they find the people who don't wind up getting Alzheimer's disease much more easily. The things that I'm talking about help your cardiovascular health, and some of the basically the way you are, the basic parts of you, your circulatory system and things like that, the same thing that causes you to get heart attacks and obesity and all those kinds of things, lack of exercise, bad diet, things like that, also are factors in possibly getting Alzheimer's disease. So there's a lot you can do, even if you're not able to buy supplements and things like that. At that level, I want to also mention, really take off on what Marshall said, is that bad air, bad water, and various kinds of environmental factors will kill you pretty quick. And so that's happening more because of the disruption of climate change and also poverty. I mean, countries just don't have enough money to do it. So when we really look at when you look at a country and you say their lifespan is 45 years or something like that, you got to realize that what they're doing is they're adding together all the infants that died with all the people who lived to be 80. And if you add those two together, the average winds up being 40 something years old. But if you don't die, you live about the same length in those countries as you do in developed countries. So people right now have kind of an upper limit. And I want to kind of end with a very interesting note that I found out. It's called Yamanaka factors, and that's spelled Yamanaka, Yamanaka. And there's a company that's starting right now called Altos Labs in Silicon Valley, and it's funded by Jeff Bezos. And what the Yamanaka factors, as I said, will actually reprogram your cells. And one of the problems was they call it pluripotent, which is that the cell gets rolled back so far that it isn't differentiated anymore. You roll it back before it became a liver, or your eyes, or whatever like that. And that's no good, because that's those cells can become cancerous and all kinds of bad things. But they managed to stop it, so they can. And right now they're working on eyes, like fixing problems like macular degeneration and other things, and they're starting to actually roll back the the aging clock on these cells and make them become like infant cells again. So watch Altos Labs. And that's what I'm going to say about the future, is that we're getting to be able to understand the biological mechanisms of aging, which is a huge leap. But then I also want to say that you can do a lot yourself, because keep your mind active, exercise, get aerobic exercise, and be sure and eat a lot of vegetables, because these life extension things that we're talking about now, most of them are already in the vegetables that you eat in smaller quantities. But that's basically something that everyone can do, no matter where they are, and that will extend your health span as well as potentially your lifespan. So thank you all. It's always wonderful being on a panel with these brilliant guys.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really great sessions, and I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. Uh, that is the way that we have to learn different topic from different speakers. And I believe that all of the speakers, they do their best, and they are the best around the world. So hopefully their knowledge and contributions will be helpful for the developing world. Thank you for joining today's sessions. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.